All right. Well, welcome. Welcome all you listeners or people who watch video, depending on how you consume your content. Today's podcast, I want to talk about something that I find not only is there not a lot of information out there for people to be able to, let's say, like a resource, okay, where can I go and look up the subject? But it's also grossly misunderstood. And so I've talked about this to some degree, kind of on the fringes. But today I'm going to kind of explore it in a little bit of a deeper manner so that there is a podcast episode, and I'll turn it into an article over on the website at some point. But so at least there's a place that people can go to, in this case, a podcast episode or a video, where you can go back and go, okay, well, what he's saying makes sense. Here's where the groundwork is laid, kind of stuff. And what I'm really going to kind of explore today is we're going to talk about benefits and why. I'm going to make the case, if you will, about why benefits matter. Okay? Because they do. They matter a lot more than a lot of people have really kind of thought about. Most people, for one reason or the other, they don't think about the fact that they don't think about benefits. For the most part, it's how much am I going to get paid? How much am I going to get paid in the pocket? And what we do is that we hyper focus. A lot of people hyper focus on how much money am I going to make in my pocket, and then if we even really think about benefits at all, what we do is we give it, just a quick glance, and that's it. Because we're more concerned with how much money do I have to spend, from how much money am I going to earn in my pocket. Now, the problem with this mindset, okay, the major problem is that what you do is that you completely dismiss, even though you might say, well, I don't really just dismiss benefits. Yes, you do. Most people do. When your sole focus is how much money am I making as opposed to, how much am I getting in the pocket, on a check, if you will, and you're not really giving a whole lot of thought to the benefits, you are dismissing it. You are. And that's unfortunate for a number of reasons, and as we're, kind of navigating through this podcast episode, I'll, kind of make the case, if you will. But benefits matter. So a couple of, kind of housekeeping things before we kind of launch into this. Number one, this is, while I'm saying benefits matter, and they do matter, these benefits that I will talk about are primarily driven from the building trades, the construction trades, the blue-collar trades, if you will. Not that there's not some crossover or some form of connection, if you will. Because, there are. I mean, retirement is retirement, except you don't really know what retirement is, especially, for those of us in the trades. You don't know what that retirement looks like. But there are some similarities. But if you're not in the trades, this is the prime focus that I will be spending time on. So, this is, of course, yet another resource for individuals who are seriously giving, consideration to, okay, well, are the trades, is it something that I'm actively interested in? Well, you need to know, among other things, right? Can I hack it? What are the pros and cons? One of the most searched articles on my website, pros and cons of the skilled trades. You can easily go over there and you can Google it and you'll come across it, or you can just go to the Wealthy Ironworker and find that article and read it that way. And amongst other different things that you should be thinking about also are, what are the benefits? What kind of benefits are there? And as I said, why they matter. So that's housekeeping, kind of a little bit of information, number one. Number two, I will also basically or essentially be advocating for union benefits. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is not that difficult to figure out. I'm a union iron worker. Matter of fact, when you go to the About page, you can see it all over the place. But in the About page where I start, talking about how, I've been a journeyman, I just list bullet points kind of journeyman, construction manager, safety manager. One of them is trade unionist. And what that I'm an advocate for union labor primarily because I'm a union iron worker and I know the benefits that I get and want far more people to not only understand the benefits that they got, but also understand the benefits they could have if they could overcome what is known as the representation gap. There's another podcast episode that's there. You can check some other relative websites, but in short, you're talking about individuals who would like to be, represented, a member of a union and be represented collectively, and they're not because the workforce where they're at currently is non-union and has not come together yet to vote, to go through the very arduous, difficult process to come to collectively together and say we want to be, dealt with collectively to become a union and negotiate because we're stronger together. That's the gist of it. But what I will be doing throughout this process is primarily talking about the construction trades, the building trades, if you will, and also obviously advocating for union benefits. I'm speaking because I am speaking with authority because I know what the benefits are. And they are something that a lot of people don't think about. So let's get into why benefits matter. First off, we'll start by listing some of the benefits, and then we'll begin to explore them. And we'll kind of deal with the shortcomings of what happens if you live your life, if you will, only thinking about what's in the pocket and not seriously giving thought to the benefit package and the benefit structure of what you got going on. The first one we're going to deal with is we're going to do insurance. And there are people who will say you shouldn't, if you're young and insurance, you should have catastrophic insurance, which is just basically you're paying next to nothing for insurance because you should never have to need it because you're young and it's just a talking point, blah, blah, blah. It sounds good, except when you take a look at what's really going on in the world today. Never mind the fact, we'll talk about family, we'll talk about children and all of that. When you take a look at all of the people that are young and are supposed to be healthy, but they're not. And there's a whole list of reasons why, right? I mean, there's diet and all this other stuff, but there's also the culture that we live in, society that we live in, and all of the various things that we're exposed to on a daily basis, right? There's the discussion of microplastics. And of course, there's also always the ongoing discussion about vaccines, and there's COVID and all of these things that, that are just, they're out there. And depending on your thoughts about how you're supposed to deal with it, or can you even deal with it, there's a whole lot of people who are negatively affected by that kind of stuff. So the general idea that it's a talking point, and primarily it's an assumption of mine, but I'm going to make it. I believe primarily individuals, when they make those statements like you're young, you should have catastrophic insurance, blah, 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 I really almost always go to, well, I think that person is trying to, discredit benefits to some degree. Oftentimes they do so because they don't want to pay the money for those benefits, right? They're always associated with some form, some company or something to that effect. And so because that's the case, that's where I go. That's where my mind goes, where I'm thinking, okay, this individual is dismissing some kind of a benefit. Is that they're anti-benefit to some degree because they don't want to have to pay for it. They want to save themselves money, oftentimes. But it's a fallacy. you need insurance. You should want insurance. You should value insurance. And then we'll launch into, right, which is the next thing, which is if you got kids, you're definitely going to have insurance, right? Your kids are going to get sick. Hate to say it, but anytime you're around the general public, you increase the reality that your kids are going to get sick significantly. There's all the well checkups. I mean, there's all these things, and then the potential, God forbid, insurance. Let's talk about what insurance kind of is when we start thinking about the potential for any issue. It is a medical potential issue your kid could have. It just comes right out of the blue. As I am talking to you on this podcast right now, I've got a couple of friends whose kid had some seizures and is now in the hospital. But guess what? They have insurance. They have benefits. Their benefits matter to them. And if you're even remotely thinking about starting a family, having a family, going through that whole process, then you too should be thinking clearly about insurance and how much of a benefit that it is to you. Now, the number that I have heard that is used or tossed around is that 2/3 of all bankruptcies in the United States are due to medical debt. They're due to medical debt. And here's the real kicker. 2/3 of those bankruptcies, like all the ones that are due or attributed to medical debt, 2/3 of all of them were from people who had insurance, which means then that they had less than ideal or less than stellar insurance. And why do I bring that up? Because the better insurance you have, the better insured or the better insulated you are. Simply put, I bring this up because as a union member, I have great insurance. Could it be better? Of course. Anything could be better. You can make $1,000 an hour, and it would be better if you had $2,000 an hour, right? Anything could be better. But the reality is I have better insurance than anybody. This is a blanket statement. I'm broad brushing here, but I've never come across somebody that said the opposite. I have better insurance as a union member than anybody that I know or am aware of that works for a company in management. Why? Because guess what? We collectively come together and then we negotiate with insurance for better. Imagine that. People coming to collectively group together and then negotiate better. That's what a union is. So insurance matters. As a benefit, as a whole, insurance matters. And if you are a union member, a union tradesman in this case, you do have insurance. And might I remind you, this is one of the other purposes of this podcast is not just to tell you that benefits matter, but to also let you know that there are benefits. The way the union structure is paid. Quick caveat here. Those of you who are not in the trades, you don't know this, you might want to check out the podcast episode where I detail the difference. But in a nutshell, the vast majority of Americans, they get paid a specific amount of money. It can be paid hourly. It can be paid in a yearly lump sum, right? Okay, you make $80,000. You make $90,000, whatever. Or you make $35 an hour if you break it down per hour, right? But the vast majority of Americans, whatever that number, that end number is, we'll use 100. 100, I'll be generous. Let's say they make $100,000 a year. And then from that 100,000, all of your benefits are taken out of your 100,000. So if you have 100,000 And let's say your insurance costs you, and this is what a lot of people do. They'll say, well, my insurance, I can't afford insurance because my insurance sucks, because they want like 200 or 250 or $300 a week to come out of my check that I pay. Well, now you don't make $100,000 anymore if you're having that insurance. Let's say now you make, 75 because your insurance costs you $25,000 a year or something like that. Well, then you go, well, if I'm going to save for my next benefit, which we'll talk about in a second, which is retirement, then I have to take that out of my total sum. So I started with 100,000, but maybe I only end up with 60,000. That's a possibility. The way that the union, especially union craftsmen, the way that our pay structure works, we call this getting what's on top of the check. So in other words, if a union craftsman, if somebody is a union iron worker, and I'll just make the numbers up, but if they say I make $40 an hour, then the only thing that comes out of that $40 an hour of their paycheck is dues. That's it. I mean, you got taxes, of course, but dues. That is it. All of your benefits are on top of the check. Or you make $40 an hour, to stay with the current example. But then on top of that, what you don't see going into your check is it going into your benefits. X amount of dollars will go into a health and welfare fund, your health insurance. It doesn't come out of your check. It's on top of it. X amount of dollars will come out of your check, will not come out of your check. It will go into a retirement fund. X amount of dollars will come out of the total package, but it's on top of your check and go into retirement. So in other words, you might get paid $40 an hour, but your total package is $55 an hour because $15 of it is directly attributed to benefits. And because you don't see it coming out of your check, a lot of union craftsmen often forget that they have those or the real value of them. So that's the secondary purpose of talking about why benefits matter, is to also educate individuals to say, look, your benefits do matter. And oh, by the way, your real value, your real total package is much more than what you get in the pocket. It just happens to be structured and negotiated to where that money goes. So insurance matters, benefits matter. Moving on to our next major benefit is retirement. Now, I know that the vast majority of Americans, the retirement is a big, big, big deal. I know a lot of people that, when they're young, they think I want the money. You're being short-sighted. I will tell you now, I think you're being short-sighted. Your future self. I have never, ever, and I mean this is not hyperbole. I mean this literally. I have never met somebody that told me that they saved too much for retirement or they started too early. I have never met someone like that. But you know what I have met and what I have heard, it's a recurring thing over and over and over, is people tell me, I wish I would have saved more. I wish I would have started saving earlier. And it's always, typically speaking, somebody that has to work much longer than they wanted to, because they'll tell you they can't afford to retire. And now there are numerous reasons why, but you can bet your bottom dollar one of them is because they didn't value benefits. They didn't think about benefits. I just need money in the pocket, money in the pocket. I want to have all these toys to play with. I want to have the jacked up truck. I want to have X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? The fishing boat, the golf course membership. I want to have all of it. I want to have every single thing that I want, and that needs money. I need money. I need a lot of money to pay for all these things, and I disregard benefits because there's somebody out there that's willing to pay me in the pocket. And then what happens? You get older, and you start to think, well, crap. Not only do I need insurance, which was the benefit we just got done discussing, now I'm staring down the barrel of possibly retirement, or at least getting to an age where I'm not physically able to work. And what do I have? For a lot of Americans today, it's only Social Security. That's it. Some Americans, a startling number of Americans, are only living off of Social Security retirement, and that's it. Social Security was never meant to be the sole source of a person's retirement income. It was never meant to be. It was always meant to supplement additional retirement savings and the like. And yet, there's a startling number of Americans who are living on a very, very small pittance or amount of money. And do you want to be that person? Is that the trajectory that you want to be? Get older, and then you need the benefits that you completely disregarded, and then you don't have enough time in a lot of ways to really gather up those benefits. If you don't, right? If you got a good head on your shoulders and you're just educating yourself about why benefits matter, then I highly recommend that you get in contact with someone when it comes to retirement. Why? Because you don't want to be one of those people. You want to be someone who, when you want to go and retire, you want to go and spend more time with your grandkids somewhere. You need to move so you can be closer to them, and you want to just not have to work X amount of hours or whatever. You've got other endeavors that you want to do, whatever the case may be. You want that choice. You want that the ability to be able to say, I can stay working longer, right? I can stay till 65 or whatever and mentor the next generation and, X, Y, and Z. I get fulfillment out of work, whatever the case may be. But you want that choice without having to make it where I have to stay working because I can't afford to retire. That's the choice that you want. I'm telling you now, future self will thank past self for some discipline in this regard. Your benefits matter. Now, the vast majority of Americans, if they have access to a retirement account, they have one or two. Most people have what's called a 401k, and it's named a 401k because of the tax line that it comes out of. Fun fact, the 401k was never intended. When it was created, it was never intended to be the sole retirement vehicle for companies. The person that created it, it was meant to supplement like a pension and that kind of stuff. It was never meant to be the sole source. But that's what companies, in large part based on greed, what they decided to do was offshore any and all retirement savings to you, the worker. Take benefits away, not give them to you. And they'll sit there and tell you that benefits don't matter because they don't want to pay benefits. Even the ones that you have today, they don't want to pay any benefits on. Your benefits matter. Now, for those of you who have a 401k, you often pay a percentage. The company will quote unquote give you a match as a percentage into your 401k. Many of you do not have access to a 401k. Many of you work somewhere where the company just does, they don't want to spend the money. They don't offer benefits. There's a whole host of reasons why. There's a second form of retirement that is available to every American, which is an IRA or an individual retirement account. There's two different variations, and I'm not going into too much detail, but one of them is post-tax and one of them is pre-tax. One of them you pay taxes on when you pull the money out. The other one you pay taxes on in today's tax rate, and the money that goes into that account grows for you. But it's the discipline is where I'm going to get to. It's the discipline to value benefits or to understand why benefits matter and to actually contribute to that retirement account or a 401k in the case of you have a potential 401k, right, through your employer. Most people, however, will underfund any and all retirement accounts in that regard. Why? Because they don't value benefits and they want all the money in the pocket. Now, transfer over, like I said, to what we're going to be talking about, which are those of us in the construction trades, and especially union. The overwhelming majority of tradesmen that I know, like a union iron worker, a union electrician, a union pipe fitter, etc., these individuals have at least 2 retirement accounts. Now, the electricians, the IBEW, I believe they have maybe even 3 because they've got, different pension setups. But I'll talk from what I know, at least the 2 that I'm aware of, for sure that I know. Number 1 is a pension. And what happens is, again, remember, it doesn't come out of your check. I said earlier, you're going to get $40 an hour in our example that I used. And the money going into those, the retirement accounts is on top of the check. The companies that you go to work for pay per hour into that specific account. In this case, what we're talking about is the pension. They pay X amount of dollars per hour for every hour you work into that fund that is then jointly managed. Hear me on this now. This account is jointly managed. You have half of the people on that, with like labor, if you will, people that are represented, that are voted, if you will, to represent the collective body of people. And then you have management that's on there. You also have industry professionals that are in there, actuaries and lawyers and all that kind of stuff, just to, check over the numbers and look, everything like that. But it's jointly managed. And those labor leaders are democratically elected to then manage and invest and all that kind of stuff for the longevity and the health of that pension plan, so that when you go to retire, you iron worker, pipe fitter, etc., you go to retire, you get what's called a pension check. It's just like Social Security, except it's a lot better for the most part. And you get it every month. You get a specific set amount or a defined, the benefit, the benefit, which is how much money you're going to get paid, is defined for you. You get X amount per month for the rest of your life. But it's a pension fund. That was the primary vehicle of savings for and benefit for millions of Americans before companies started to make this massive switch, turning off pensions and going to offering people 401ks. Oh, I'll have the account or whatever, but you need to invest in it. Pensions used to be a much bigger thing. Now, that's the union craftsman, right? A pension fund. The second retirement fund that the overwhelming majority of union craftsmen have is what is we know it in the industry as the annuity fund. Now, for sake of clarity, it acts much more like a 401k than anything else. That's kind of what it is. When you say annuity fund to investment professionals, they don't know what they're talking about because they think it's a different product. It is not. It acts very similar to a 401k, but the basic gist of this is for every, again, on top of your check, we're not going to take it out of that $40 example, on top of the check, that company that you're working for pays X amount of dollars per hour that you work into a fund, your own personal retirement account, which is, again, called an annuity fund, but it acts like a 401k per hour. You might have we'll make this up, but let's just say that the money goes in as, X amount of dollars per hour. And then by the end of the year, the company has contributed into your annuity fund or your 401k, if you will, $11,000. And this is year in and year out. And then you have all the compounding growth that obviously takes place from investments, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you go to retire, guess what? If you got into the trades early and young, you might have a substantial amount of money in that retirement account in just your annuity or your 401k. Then you add on top of that the pension fund that gives you a check every month for the rest of your life as well. Now compare that, okay? Compare that to the craftsman, to the individual, to the American that prioritized money in the pocket over everything else. And they got older, and they're staring down the barrel of getting older and being unable to work or unable to retire because they don't have a retirement, or they have dramatically less. They can only draw Social Security, and that's it. That's all they can draw. And you go, why? Well, it's because they didn't think benefits mattered. And I'm here to tell you today that benefits matter. They matter. Now, there's a whole host of other, little small ancillary benefits that really do matter, and that they vary by geographical region and what people value. But a couple of other ones that kind of pop up are what we call EAPs, or employee assistance programs. These are things that are a part of a health plan, so it's like an extension of insurance, if you will. But what it is it's more target focused on individuals and mental health, and the need to talk to people. Like, we don't want you to do something, that you cannot come back from. So we want to, we have this resource, if you will, or this additional benefit. Another one, and again, this is tooting the union benefit structure. If you, as a iron worker, pipe fitter, whatever, get laid off, because the job that you were working on gets done, and then you're waiting, you got some time that you want to work at the house or whatever the case may be, and you're ready to go back to work later on, but you're not going directly. You might have a week, 2-3 weeks, whatever it happens to be. If that is the case, your insurance doesn't stop. Your insurance doesn't stop like the guy who works for the non-union company that gets laid off. As soon as he is no longer employed by that company, his insurance is done. Whereas with what we call a multi-employer insurance plan, the way our plans are in retirement structured is you continue to keep your insurance. Again, one more additional quote unquote benefit that you get, as opposed to someone else who either A, does not understand what benefits are, or B, doesn't value them. But kudos to you for taking the time to listen to a podcast episode that is at least trying to help you understand why benefits matter and what value they bring to you and your life. You do not want to be that person that cannot stop working because you don't have any retirement. You do not want to be that person that has to go out and claim bankruptcy from a medical procedure or a medical issue because you didn't value medical insurance, because you wanted it all in the pocket. Now, by this time, because we're very close to the end of this podcast episode, by this time I can hear somebody saying, well, the cost of things nowadays, I need all the money in the pocket. I'm not discounting the fact that pricing is crazy, that the housing market today, as I'm sitting here recording this, right, mid 2026 is bananas, and there's going to be a correction and all that kind of stuff. I'm not discounting any of that. But what I am saying to you is that you are listening to someone whose wife is a stay-at-home mom, and we have made intentional choices to not go out and get an expensive car payment, to not go out and spend a whole lot of money frivolously, and to try to be smart about what we do so that we can maintain that. And also remember the benefits. They are on the forefront of my mind primarily because I understand them. I know that they are going to be down the road. They're good for me now, But I know that also down the road, I'm not thinking about the here and now, and I can't see 6 inches past my face. Your benefits matter. And if you are working for a company that does not have benefits, you need to seriously consider what type of life you want to live down the line. And do you want to be that person that feels like they can't retire? Or do you want to be the person with choice and intentionality and discipline and focus down that way? Ultimately, what's taking place is that the choice is going to be yours. But at least there is a resource where I get the possibility of talking to someone, and hopefully they're listening, about why benefits matter. At some point in the future, I hope to come together and just do a deeper dive into the mechanics of what a pension plan, is, and what it looks like, and what an annuity fund or a 401k is, and how, this thing could transform your retirement life, et cetera, et cetera. But for so many Americans, they do not prioritize retirement at all. And this is short-sighted. And the last talking point that I'll address, and then we'll end this podcast episode, is quite simply this. The government is aware when you go to retire, or you reach retirement age, I'll say it that way. When you reach retirement age, if you're still working, you're still contributing to the economy. You're still contributing to the country in that regard. But when you go to retire, whether it's because you're, from a physical perspective, you just can't do the work anymore and you medically have to retire, or you're going to make a go of it because you've got Social Security, or you were very smart and you're making, you prioritize benefits and understood their value. When you do retire, you will either be a contributor to the economy, through retirement savings and spending and all that kind of stuff, or you will be a drain on the economy. It's one of the two. If you have retirement savings and are able to contribute to the economy, then you will. But if you don't, then you will be a drain on the economy, on your fellow citizens. And why? Because if you don't have enough money to live, what's going to happen? Who's going to pick up the shortfall? What's going to happen? What's going to take place? Now, the government is obviously aware of this and the projections and all that kind of stuff, and they're very, very good at kicking the can down the road. But kick the can down the road they do. But, from one American citizen to another, as you're listening to this, I'm here to tell you that retirements, benefits matter. I mean, they ultimately do. And you're going to want to have some form of choice down the line where you got money coming in and whatnot, as opposed to, you're a slave to a choice because you don't have any other resources or assets. There's nothing you can potentially do because you're an active drain on the economy. And so there's some legislation that's drafted that says, okay, all right, you can live in this home right here, but you're not getting any discretionary spending. You're not going to have any Social Security money when you go to retire because you don't have any retirement savings and you're a drain on the economy. Now, what that ultimately looks like about retirement plans, about whether they end up passing legislation at some point about mandatorily funding retirement, a retirement account that maybe attaches to everybody, something similar to the Australian system or whatever. I don't know. But today, mid-2026, benefits matter. And they matter more than you think. And to some degree, if you prioritize money in the pocket over and just completely disregard benefits at all, that's a very irresponsible choice in the long run. It has the very real potential to bite you in the rear. So if you have the ability to prioritize benefits then I'm encouraging you to do so. And if you don't, then I'm encouraging you to make the steps so that you can prioritize benefits. They matter. They exist for a reason. So I hope this podcast episode has helped some people to really understand and to illustrate that there's a lot of benefits that do matter out there, and hopefully that you understand a little bit more. If there's some point of clarity that you want from me, I'm more than willing to take that time and address it. Go down to the description of the show here, and you can go to the contact page that's linked. It'll take you over there. Fill it out. Send me an email. I'll reply back. I always check that email for potential guests and bits of information and the like. And if there's something that you're seeking, allow me to help you out. Other than that, benefits matter, my friends. So thanks for taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a great day. And as always, stay safe out there.